Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Big Picture Film Club. My next guest is a very interesting one for me, and it's a very exciting episode to do. For those of you that don't know, I'm a practitioner of Muay Thai, that's Thai boxing. Have done so for many years, and it's very much kind of helped me in many areas of my own personal development, and how I apply those principles to even things like Big Picture Film Club. And so my next guest is Nuakai Aru, is a documentary filmmaker, but also is my Muay Thai teacher, my crew, as said in Muay Thai. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion, and I have a lot of questions I want to ask, and really hearing his perspective weekly when we do our Muay Thai classes. I just kind of wanted to bring that conversation onto this platform. So, Nuakai, welcome to the Big Picture Film Club. How you doing?
So, Adi Cap, give thanks. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Precious. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I didn't know where to quite begin, but I think I want to start with documentary filmmaking. And so, like, the first film of yours I saw was like Nubian Spirit, and so I just wanted to know, like, how did you get into documentary filmmaking first of all?
Yeah, good question. Got to start somewhere. Generally, I'm a black man. I'm of mixed heritage. I grew up in the UK. My dad is Jamaican. My mother is British. She's a combination of English, Irish, Scottish. And obviously my father is made up of many different African tribes and Native American culture, and probably also some European mixed in there as well. And so growing up in the UK, I didn't really learn much about African history, Caribbean history in school, and struggling with identity in my teens. I was trying to figure out, who am I? How do I fit into the world around me? All of the things I could see around me around black culture were a lot more negative stereotypes and stuff. So, through a lot of wrong directions, I eventually found a path of studying knowledge of self. And that led me to learn a lot about African history, African culture, the African diaspora, so Africans globally around the world, learn a lot more about African spirituality and just indigenous cultures generally. And that journey began very much through reading books, looking up stuff online. And then I started doing some internship with a production company. And then I said to them, look, I've just learned about the history of Sierra Leone. I didn't know that Africans who had ever been enslaved in America had ever returned back to Africa. Yeah. I was like, wow, what an amazing history. So my first ever film I made was called The Lion Mountains, and it looked at the history of Sierra Leone. So I put together a small team, spent 3 months studying in the National Archives in Kew Gardens, learning from the British point of view about Sierra Leonean history, and then basically embarked on a 2-month journey to Sierra Leone, interviewing scholars, elders in different communities, museum professors, and just traveling around really learning about that history. And going from studying books and reading online and stuff like that, kind of like, you could say an armchair, independent, amateur historian, anthropologist, right? I kind of just embarked on these journeys and started really learning about the world, learning about who I was as somebody of African descent, learning about how the world had formed today, how Europe had become what it had become, how Africa, what Africa was, how it's become what it is today, how the Americas are, and really getting a much bigger worldview based on the journeys I went on. So that was the first film I made. I went to Sudan, made a film in Sudan, what was Nubian Spirit that you're talking about now, that looks at 5,000 years of history along the Nile Valley. I went to Ethiopia, went to South Africa, I've been to Nigeria. I didn't make films in every country I went to, but I continued this journey of studying history and culture and just trying to understand who we are today as humans in the 21st century.
I'm glad you said that. And on that point of I guess history and culture, I guess so much of what is viewed or portrayed as a nation's history, and or what people may think of as a people's culture is kind of like very much filtered through a particular lens of who's telling the story and who has the power to sort of tell those stories.
Exactly.
I guess in your documentaries, and particularly with the next one, kind of Warrior Spirit, you do a good job of trying to dig up that the root of culture. And I guess how do you know what to filter out, what information to go to, who to talk to? Like how does that exploration work, so you put together something that's as good as representation of a people's culture as you can?
Yeah, exactly. I think when it comes to telling the story, you can always have an idea in your head, like, okay, I'm going to go and make this film. I want it to say this. But as you go out and embark on a journey, you're going to meet different people. You're going to find out different sites. You're going to find out different locations. And the journey and the film kind of begin to tell the story itself. And I'm a big believer in it. Like, in all of my films, I've always gone, okay, this would be a cool idea. Let's go and specialize in this subject, because, you know, I didn't know much about Sierra Leonean history when I first started, but by the end I had a much bigger picture, first-hand experience of Sierra Leonean history. So I'm a big believer in letting, especially documentaries, organically tell themselves through the people you meet, through the interviews you have, through the locations you discover. So when we were talking about Warrior Spirit, again, for me, as a filmmaker, an actor, a little bit of a model. Now I've just reached 40. I thought I'd start a bit of modeling. It's a bit of fun, like working at dad model vibes. But I've also been doing Muay Thai for like over 25 years. And obviously, as I progressed and developed in Muay Thai, it very much became part of my philosophy of life, self-mastery, personal development. And so I got to a stage where I was able to share and teach that to help empower other people. And I very much train myself so that I have the courage, the strength of will, the self-belief to go more into the unknown and discover things and share these stories as a filmmaker. And so they kind of work together. So what I did with Warrior Spirit, for example, one of my students, actually, who's a journalist, she approached me and said, look, I'd love to make a film about you. Can we do something? And I said, well, to be honest, right now, I'm not really interested in making a film about me, but I'd love to make one about Muay Thai. And not just, you know, if you say to most people Muay Thai, most people know about it from the point of view of fighting, you know, like UFC, MMA, or you might see like certain martial art films, and you think about the violence or the skill of fighting. Well, what I really wanted to try and do in this documentary was cover more around the transformation, the personal transformational journey that people go on when they participate in hard training with a strong ethos. And, you know, myself and yourself really know what it's like to go through that internal transformational journey of hard training, pushing yourself, discovering yourself, overcoming yourself, and transforming yourself into the best version of yourself. So I really wanted to try and capture that. So that was the essence. So then it was really like, we were going to Thailand. So how could we just meet different people along the road, ask them questions and see what they bring forth? So, and then, you know, you will talk to somebody. I was talking to Grandmaster Woody, who is one of our senior master teachers based in Thailand. And he went into some really interesting aspects about elements and how we're all part of the universe. And, you know, I hadn't directly heard that from somebody who does Muay Thai. I've kind of discovered that in myself as a martial artist. And Ajahn has always taught me, Ajahn Vinny has always taught me that we're part of the universe. But the way he explained it was in a way that also blew my mind. And then that kind of opened up another aspect of, okay, let's link that to something else. And, you know, then the story starts to tell itself as it goes.
And so I guess this journey of you know, the sort of self-development that Muay Thai has given you, and myself, I mean, did you start doing Muay Thai before you got into films, or was this like both kind of running parallel, where there was a moment in your life and you're like, I'm opening myself up to new things, film's one of them, Muay Thai is one, because they're both big passions that have kind of run concurrently throughout your life.
Yeah, I think really, probably actually I started martial arts before anything. You know, my parents separated when I was a young kid. I was about 4 or 5. And then I used to go and spend the weekend at my dad's. And I can remember like one weekend, he just let me watch Kickboxer, right? So I must have been about like 6 or 7 or whatever. And Kickboxer starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. Unknown to me at the time that it's a film where he goes to Thailand and he, you know, his brother does kickboxing and his brother gets his ass whooped by the Thais, right? And this guy is an American kickboxing champion and he feels like he's the man and he goes to Thailand and this smaller Thai guy just mashes him up. So then Jean-Claude Van Damme, who's the younger brother, studies Muay Thai, goes and trains with this little old master in the countryside and then becomes kick-ass using in Muay Thai. Interestingly, they called the film Kickboxer.
Yeah.
But in truth, you know, it should have been called Thai Boxer or Muay Thai Warrior or Nak Muay. You know what I mean? So that was one of my first ever films I ever watched, and my first ever martial art films. And I'd go back to my mum's, and I'd be like doing jumping kicks in the front room and like kicking the sofa and stuff. And she'd be like, "What is wrong with you? What are you?" And you know, she wasn't happy with my dad letting me watch these films. But that kind of awoke, you know, as a young kid, this love of the physical arts, of the mastery of physical movement. And then my mum put me into some jiu-jitsu, some kickboxing stuff as a kid. But because I moved around quite a lot, I didn't get consistency. So then I moved to a new area. I did a bit of judo. Didn't really like it so much, but did it for a little while. Then I tried some traditional boxing, did some fencing. And, you know, through picking up bits, I then began just playing with movement myself, just naturally practicing movement. And then I had a bit of a gap, really, from like probably from about 12 to 16. I didn't really do any trained art. And then a friend of mine introduced me to Muay Thai, and that was just a game changer. You know, that was just a game changer at 16. It was like the hardest type of exercise I'd ever done. Like it pushed me the most. It was like this. It was like explosive exercise that just hit every part of my body, and I was like, "Whoa, this is amazing!" It makes me want to throw up. I'm coming back because I want to be able to master this so that it doesn't make me want to throw up. And I just, you know, Muay Thai. I just love the practicality of it. You know, it's the science of 8 limbs. It's a very functional, practical fighting system, and probably one of the best forms of full body fitness on the planet. And it's fun. Do you know what I mean? So that really started my journey of kind of studying martial arts. I trained with a Thai guy called Ralph Bill at first. I trained with him for about 1.5 years. Then I moved into central London. So I just, again, because the key is in any martial art, right? You're going to have teachers who come into your life and they impart their wisdom and their knowledge to you and they show you some stuff. But the mastery and the element, the key with it is, what do you do with what you've been given?
Yeah.
Right? Do you just stay at that stage, or do you go home and do you practice it? Do you integrate it? Do you let it become yours and then you start to move with it? So because my training was often so broken up, I would learn stuff and then I'd spend a period of time without another teacher. So I would then really practice and study and just, you know, develop what I had learned. And so that became my journey until then I started training with Arjan Vinny. I trained at a couple different gyms between Ralph and Arjan Vinny. But then Arjan Vinny became like a father figure to me, really, in my early 20s. And he just became the kind of representation of a strong warrior man who had like a depth of knowledge around physical arts, discipline.
So for those who don't know, Arjan, that title, what's that in relation to?
Yes, so Arjan means master. So I'm a crew in Muay Thai. So crew means teacher in the Thai language, somebody who can impart knowledge and empower people. Then you have assistant master, and then you have master. So Arjan is a master, is graded as a master. So Arjan Vinny Dekan, he is a master in Muay Thai. Graded in Thailand and over here. And he really taught me a very traditional side of Muay Thai, where I started to learn Muay Baran, what's the ancient form of Muay Thai. The only kind of some more specialist people understand that side of the art. It's more form-based, and it was designed for war. It wasn't designed for ring or competition. It was designed for war. And he taught me a very traditional side of Muay Thai, where we use the Thai language and the Thai culture, and really helped me to understand more deeply the warrior's code. And being a relatively unruly young teenager, and just not really having good, strong, stable male figures around me in my life when I was younger, I got kicked out of school and things like that, and found it quite hard to fit into this society that I found very hostile and not very accepting of me. I experienced a lot of racism growing up. I grew up in central London and in the countryside in the UK, and I experienced a lot of hostility. So I kind of easily fell into that label of outsider kind of thing, didn't do well in education, too tough. Only started to do well in education when I really started to focusly educate myself, and I started to really study and read, and then go to independent classes on African history and Afrocentric thinking and spirituality. And I really dedicated many years in my 20s to study that I didn't really receive when I was younger. But Arjan Vinny basically taught me, helped me to discover a lot more discipline in my life, right? And so that, the martial arts, on top of me going on these journeys and really being passionate to discover who we are in the 21st century, how to understand the world from a much broader perspective. You mentioned earlier, we very much have been taught a very small perception of reality and history, coming from European, especially English culture. And because of colonialism, slavery, and some of the atrocities that British culture did in the past, they've kind of covered up a lot of the history and retold it to fit into a cultural lens that kind of makes them look more like the good guys. They kind of covered up a lot of the enslavement, the wiping out of cultures, the genocides. They've covered up a lot of that history and retold stories. So again, we're moved to a different element and a different time in history now, where the world is so much larger, it's so much more interconnected. We're able to understand African history, if you're interested. The documentation is there about ancient Africa's great civilizations and cultures. You can understand about Central, South American, North American history, pre-European takeover. We can understand Asian history, Aborigine history. And for me, as a human in the 21st century, it's like, how do we put all these stories together and understand the human story? Because we're all part of this amazing human story that is part of this organic planetary story.
Yeah.
And I think we can easily get caught up in looking at things from very small cultural lenses that sometimes has a lot of prejudice based on, who has gone to power. Well, me as a human being, or me as a spiritual being, I'm really interested in our collective story. Let's put it all on the table. Let's look at it. What can we learn from what wasn't good? What can we build on from what is good? And so when I go out and looking for stories, that's what I'm looking for, is what can we build on that's going to help us understand things to progress more? What can we learn from that can help us try to not repeat those same mistakes?
On that point, are there particular, when you've done like that, you've gone to Sierra Leone, Sudan, and are there kind of unifying themes that you find in sort of particularly ancient cultures that have sort of lasted, hundreds, thousands of years, that sort of tie them together, in terms of ways of being, ways of looking at the earth, or ways of looking or explaining how they came to be? Are those unifying themes there? Or?
Definitely. I think there's unifying themes across the planet in regards to culture. Like, one of the things we often forget, because we get very stuck on the cultural story, the flag, like British history versus Japanese history or Chinese history, or like French or German, right? You get stuck on the culture, what might be linked to your language. But removed of that, if we go back to our predecessors, we go back to our more where we originally came out from, all cultures around the world had this amazing level of spiritual connection to the planet. They had a deep spiritual connection to believing in a living planet, where they had a deeper level of respect for plants and for all other animals, and also had a much more collective understanding of things. They worked as a collective much more, you know. And then you'll find also around the world a lot more cultures had rites of passage. So you had traditions that helped young people learn how to survive and thrive in their environments, and then reach an age where they were given responsibility to become integral parts as adults, as part of the whole.
Yeah.
And you know, in today's culture, we've been so divided and turned into all these individual units, and we're just expected to roughly figure out how to become an adult. There's no distinct transition, right? You know, I like to always look back to our most natural way. If you think back to when we were hunter-gatherers, or when we were more nomadic tribes of people, right? Where we lived more free on the earth, and we interacted. We took what we needed when we needed it, and our culture was more about supporting one another, right? And continue to grow and evolve. And I think when we look at those sort of more free cultures, you'd have to learn. If you're a young person growing up in that culture, you need to learn what's dangerous, what's safe, what's good to eat, what's not good to eat. You know, where are the boundaries of how you can thrive, and what do you need to do to be part of the community, right? So in today's world, it's the same sort of thing, but it's been very much, there's so much of a more human culture. And I think we often aren't taught effectively all the laws that help us, help that structure this society today, right? We should be learning how to understand the laws that make this society function.
Like social laws, or like social, what sort of
kind of
laws?
Both, like laws, like, you know, in school, I think I'm a massive advocate for, in school, people should be taught how to set up companies, how to pay their own taxes, how to file for grants, how to apply to get housing, how to function in this society. There's loads of different means that can help you get along, but if you don't know that they exist, you're never going to access them, right?
Yeah.
So on that level, but then also social laws of, like, you know, cause and effect, so that young people are learning how to become integrated in society, so that society can develop and develop and develop. We live in today very cash-based societies where people are, it's a very hierarchical system, and the main foundation of our society is about making money rather than social development and protection of our planet. And I think in the past, a lot more of our predecessors, their natural way of being, they had a spiritual kind of connectivity where they believed there was cause and effect. How they lived had an impact on themselves in the now and the after. And they had a bigger understanding of how to live more in tune with nature and the natural world, to not just destroy and just kill off an entire herd and eat everything, and then you got nothing next season. You know, they would take just what they needed, so they would still, it would be sustainable, right? I think we're living in that kind of culture in a minute where it's not so sustainable. It's very much just eat. I'm probably going a bit, but you know.
No, it's all good. It's all game. It's all knowledge, and that's kind of what we're here about. And on that point, tell us a bit more about Warrior Spirit and what that kind of your latest documentary is about, and how that journey takes place and how it's documented.
So Warrior Spirit, Forged in the Fires of Muay Thai, is a documentary that really gives you a window into what Muay Thai is. And Muay Thai is the science of 8 limbs. It's an ancient martial art that comes from Thailand, the country once known as Siam. And it looks at how Muay Thai evolved. You know, what's the difference between the battlefield side of Muay Thai and the sports side of Muay Thai? And then what is Muay Thai in the Western world today? Like how do people use Muay Thai in the UK, in the rest of the world outside of Thailand, and what Muay Thai means within Thailand, and learning about these different training processes, learning about how Muay Thai is now used in the ring sport side of things, and also how Muay Thai is being used for personal development. personal progression, personal discipline. And again, as a documentary, it also covers the potential we all have to transform ourselves through hard physical training with a strong ethos for personal development.
We've, I guess, both been very sort of very privileged to have gone to Thailand like on a couple of occasions, both of us, although separately. I wanted to kind of, I wanted you to sort of expand on a point in terms of, you said what Muay Thai means for people in Thailand. So, I mean, how was that first experience kind of going to Thailand? And then, you know, you have this knowledge that you have through Ralph, through Arjun, Vinny, and how did your appreciation for Muay Thai change, or your knowledge of Muay Thai change on that sort of first visit to Thailand, where actually, you know, I've learned something, you know, through training, but now I'm sort of like immersed in it. Does that sort of change the way you take in the discipline and apply the principles of Muay Thai, or how was that for you?
I mean, it was amazing, in truth. I think being able to go back to Thailand is definitely a game changer, right? If you do any martial art or any sport or any thing that originated somewhere, returning to the source is always a massive empowerment to your awareness of that thing, because you understand where it came from, how it emerged, and also you get the pedigree of the people who have been developing it. You know, Muay Thai, they say, is hundreds of years old, but there's also lots of legend that it was thousands of years old. And so in the land in Asia, this art has been slowly developing and evolving, and it's still evolving today around the world, because everyone who takes it on continues to evolve it through their own way of expressing energy. And so for me, when I first went to Thailand, I spent a month traveling around by myself. I was actually also trying to recce for some locations to try and see if I could get to go to the Andaman Islands. So I went into Thailand, and I wanted to do a film about the Andaman and Nakar people, like the Jawara, who are one of the last untouched tribes in the world, actually. And they're on a small island in between India and Thailand, and they're jet black. They look like they're from the Congo. And so I've always wanted to go and do a film about them. So I was actually in Thailand for two reasons. One, to go back to the source. I spent time training with the Crew Muay Association in Muay Baran, the ancient side of Muay Thai. And for me, it was so refreshing, you know, like being there. In Thailand, you train every day, twice a day. In the UK, you maybe train, you know, if you're fanatical, you could train 5 days a week, but maybe once a day, usually. Most people train once or twice a week. So in Thailand, you can really live it, because, you know, you can live in a gym, you wake up at 7 a.m, go for a run, you train for 2 hours, you know, like you leave nothing behind, you give everything of yourself, right? You have a whole transformational experience physically. Then you kind of rest, you have your breakfast, you chill out for the day, then again, you train again, 5 till 7, leave nothing behind, give everything you've got for yourself, and then next day, go again. And however many days you can do that. You know, when we often go on tour, we try and do it for about 6 days, 5 to 6 days of training twice a day. Then we'll have a day off, and then we'll go straight back on it again. And to experience training like a Thai fighter, because, you know, the Thais in Thailand, Muay Thai has very much been pushed for the ring now. So it's a sport. It was their national sport for a long time. I don't think it is now. I think football is actually now just creeped over and become their national sport. But Muay Thai was their national sport for many, many, many years. And so when you're there, you really get a sense of the knowledge, the wisdom, and the understanding of people who have been living this fighting art. And because it's a ring sport, you know, it makes big money. So they train people to become fighters. And then you've got this, in a sense, is modern day gladiators, but obviously not to the death. So you've got people who are like top of their game, either teaching, or training and going into the ring professionally fighting. So you get a real amazing experience of learning, first-hand experience for learning and gaining that knowledge in Thailand.
Awesome. So I guess it'd be interesting, like what's next for you in terms of your own journey, both in I guess Muay Thai and filmmaking. Have you got anything
Nice.
in the horizon?
Yeah, actually, there's lots of things going on at the moment. One, I'm working on a TV series.
Oh, wow, cool.
Kind of like an exciting sort of action, sci-fi thriller. Can't give too much of that away at the moment, but super exciting. So we're working on that. We're going to be pitching that soon, later this year. I'm also working, I'm really excited about, I'm really working on a training package that I can offer people for personal development. So it's a month-long training package where you can do a combination of HIIT training, Muay Thai, Qigong, what's about energy cultivation, and breathing and meditation, and then a type of yoga stretch. So it's quite a holistic package that takes people on a journey for more self-mastery, to gain more self-courage, to gain more discipline, to become fitter, get in better shape, feel better about yourself, and understand yourself a little bit more as a physical being, as an intellectual being, and as an energetic being. So it's called Muay Vitality, and the first product that we're going to be bringing out is going to be called MV30, Learn how to unleash your inner warrior.
What was that? MV30?
So it's called MV30, Unleash Your Inner Warrior.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like so that's going to be coming out soon, man.
So for the people that want to know, like, where can they check out your film catalog, or just kind of hit you up for, all the work that you do in terms of like Muay Thai training and one-to-ones and so on?
So for the film stuff I've done in the past, there is black9films.com. Black is the word, 9 is the number, films.com. For all Muay Thai related stuff, my academy is called Muay Thai Masters Academy. And for this new training, personal development fitness program that's coming real soon, it's called Muay Vitality, and that will be under muayvitality.com.
Awesome. Nuakai Aru, aka Crew Lionheart, as I know you. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure. Nice. And yeah, man, let's keep it going.
Likewise, man. Good to see you, bro. Nice one. Thanks for the interview.
All good.
Peace. Have a good day.